Hello YouTube, welcome to another pre-Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today we're covering the one, the only, Zed.
The unseen blade is the deadliest.
For more of my content, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/egamingtv or on Twitter at egaming_TV. All of the links for my social medias and the timestamps for this guide will be down in the video description, so make sure you check that out. I do Riot Point giveaways at the end of every month on my Twitter, as well as a poll each night on which champion I should cover the next day. So, if you're interested in entering those Riot Point giveaways, or you want to vote on which champion guide should be next, make sure you head over to Twitter. But enough of that, let's dive into some pros and cons. Zed's a mid lane assassin with a really strong lane phase, and he makes for a solid split pusher in the later stages of the game. He's able to really shove minion waves, and he's a really strong duelist, and really thrives in those 1v1s. He's got pretty high mobility, which makes him a really good roamer and ganker, and has very flashy outplay potential. His passive then does bonus damage on the first auto attack against a target below 50% health, which makes it really easy to CS on him. Zed, however, like all the other assassins out there, is very vulnerable to crowd controls, considering he goes for a high damage build and is not tanky at all. This also makes him a very mediocre team fighter, and he really needs his items so he can actually delete a single target. With his kit and the fact that he has to manage his shadows, he is rather hard to master, and he even has item counters like Azonia's, which can completely stop the damage from his ultimate. For our masteries, we go 12 ferocity and 18 cunning, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as our keystone mastery. Since we are a quick comboing assassin that relies on deleting a single target, Thunderlord's Decree is a great way to add additional damage to make that happen. You could also take Feast over Fresh Blood if you did prefer a little bit more lane sustain, or you could go Natural Talent instead of Vampirism if you did want a bit more damage. It's completely up to you. For our runes, we go for Lethality Reds, Armor Yellows, Magic Resist Blues, and Attack Damage Quints. This is a really good all-around page, but I would also make one that does have scaling health on the yellows if you are in an AP matchup. Of course, you do also have the option of taking pure attack damage and getting rid of that lethality, and going for attack damage reds instead. Our first required summoner spell is Flash. It will help you escape, gap close, reposition in teamfights and duels, and jump over walls. It's easily the most versatile summoner spell in the game since you can use it offensively and defensively, so basically, it's a must grab. For your second summoner spell, you'll want to pick up Ignite. The extra damage will give you a lot more kill potential on that enemy mid laner during the lane phase, and it can help you get snowballing. Zed is a champion who relies on having a decent early and mid game, and this can really help you out. The only other thing I would consider would be Teleport if you plan on split pushing for a lot of the game, but generally Ignite and Flash are your best options. Now let's jump right into our abilities, and let's start at our passive, Contempt of the Weak. Zed's basic attacks against targets below 50% of their maximum health deal between 6 and 10% of their maximum health as bonus magic damage. This can then only occur on the same target once every few seconds, and that does have an on-target cooldown of 10. So this passive is great for two reasons, and the first one is last hitting will be an ease because you will be doing bonus damage on those minions below 50%. And of course there's also the fact that when you go for an all-in, this will deal a nice extra chunk of damage in your all-in combo. Now let's move on to our Q, Razor Shuriken. Zed throws his spinning blades forward, dealing physical damage to the first enemy they pass through, and 60% damage to enemies thereafter. For the Living Shadow portion, active shadows also throw a shuriken in the direction of the target point. Additional shurikens striking the same enemy only deals 75% damage, but they do restore energy. So this is the ability you max first because it's great for harassing the champion since it does have a 900 range, and it's great for clearing minion waves. When we're level 6 and we have a shadow from our ultimate, we can also drop our W for another shadow and have the potential of landing 3 Razor Shurikens, which will deal a lot of damage. It's a great ability, and if you can land these during the lane phase, there's not many champions that can deal with this damage. Now let's move on to your W ability, which is that Living Shadow. For your first active, Zed's shadow dashes forward, remaining in place for 4.5 seconds. His shadow will then mimic his basic abilities. If a mimicked ability strikes a target affected by its primary effect, Zed also restores energy. For its second active, Zed then blinks to his shadow's location, swapping places with it. Zed, however, must be within a certain radius of his shadow to reactivate this ability. So this is your main way of actually making a shadow. Of course you do get one from your ultimate, but this is one you can get up a lot more often. There's a lot of different combos you can use with this ability, and we will cover those later, but generally you will use this under the enemy champion, use your abilities, and then you can jump forward onto the shadow with its second active. In Zed's rework, this no longer gives you bonus AD, so we do max this one last because the only thing we get is that shadow. Now let's look at that last basic ability, your E, Shadow Slash. Zed spins its blades, dealing physical damage to nearby enemies and reducing Living Shadow's cooldown by 2 seconds for every enemy hit. For the Living Shadow, active shadows also slash, dealing physical damage to nearby enemies and slowing them for 1.5 seconds. Mimic slashes that hit the targets affected by the primary slash enhance the slow by 50% and restore energy, but deal no additional damage. So this ability we max second because it's not as good damage as our Q, but it of course still adds some damage, so it is better than our W. I also basically use this all the time after I do drop my shadow because landing the slow from your shadow slash will make landing your Q a hell of a lot easier. Alright, now we arrive at the ultimate, which of course is still Deathmark. For the passive, scoring a kill or assist with Deathmark or while Deathmark is active will permanently grant Zed bonus attack damage, and this is non-stacking. This will be 5 plus between 5 and 15% of the target's total attack damage. That added passive is the only thing that's changed in the reworked version of his R ability. Your first cast makes you go behind the target enemy, you will have a ghost where you were before, and then after you do a bunch of damage, that damage will proc again later on after duration ends. For the second cast, Zed swaps places with the shadow he left behind before. The passive is pretty decent, it is nice because they did remove all that bonus attack damage from our W, now it's kinda just on the ultimate instead. As for combos with this ability, well, we're going to be talking about that in about 2 minutes. First though is the skill order, and we want to start by putting a point into our ultimate whenever we can at 6, 11, and 16. Then we focus on maxing our Q, it's our main way of dishing some extra damage in our combos and is also great for farming. Then we move on to our E ability, as it is also damage and it does provide a slow, which is rather nice as well. Since they removed the extra damage from our W, we max it last, we just get one early point at level 2, so we can get duplicates of our abilities. For our early game harass combo, we first start by dropping our Living Shadow under the enemy champion. Then use your E ability to slow the enemy and do a nice chunk of damage. You'll then want to follow up by quickly hitting the enemy with 2 Razor Shurikens and then reactivate Living Shadow if you want to teleport to your shadow and start auto-attacking. Of course, if this combo goes well and you get the enemy champion low, you can also ignite for that kill. For our level 6 all-in, we first start by deathmarking onto the enemy. Then quickly drop your Living Shadow under the enemy and use your Shadow Slash again to slow the enemy. Now you'll have 2 shadows and yourself near the enemy champion so you can hit them with 3 Razor Shurikens. At this point, you can either ignite them, keep auto-attacking, or jump back out with your Deathmark. In the early game, you want to try to bully the enemy as much as you can with your early game harass combo and focus on last hitting. You can start harassing as soon as you're level 2 by hitting them with 2 Razor Shurikens by dropping your Living Shadow. Once you have your E ability, you'll want to insert it into your combo for some extra damage and a slow which will make landing your Razor Shuriken much easier. Try to get kills with your Deathmark when you are level 6 or at least push the enemy out of lane. Once they're out of lane, shove the minion wave so they miss experience and gold. Whenever you shove that lane, you want to look to roam and try to help your other lanes. The mid game is usually going to start when some towers start dropping and you have a couple items. In the mid game, you're then going to want to spend some more time roaming than you did in the early game. You're going to have a lot of mobility with your out of combat movement speed from some of your items and your Yumu's Ghost Blade, so your roams are going to be quick and very effective as long as you land your skill shots. Every time your Deathmark is off cooldown, you should be looking for a squishy target to delete, to keep, or start snowballing. Once you find a pick, work with your team and take either a tower, dragon, or perhaps even Baron. Finally, in the late game, you're usually going to find yourself either split pushing or team fighting. In teamfights, your goal is to kill a squishy on the backline, then escape with your shadows. Wait for your team to engage, then get onto that backline. It's almost never a good idea to start the fight unless you're massive and the enemy has no crowd control. Wait for your opportunity. Split pushing is then a great way to put a massive amount of pressure on the map as long as your team is able to prevent objectives and defend towers in a 4v5. You can push waves very quickly with all of your AoE and your high attack damage, so if nobody comes, you can take their whole base pretty damn quickly. Just make sure you get some deep wards to watch for their rotation. Now let's move on to a couple hard matchups, and let's begin with Jace. Now Jace is a hard skill matchup, but it's definitely in Jace's favor. Try your best to dodge his Acceleration Gate Shock Blast combo to remain at a high health pool, and then harass him with your Razor Shurikens. Try to all-in him when you're level 6, but try to bait out his Thundering Blow beforehand so he can't knock you back when you do ultimate. Then there's Swain, and Swain's harass is really hard to deal with in the early game, and you may have to last hit from range with your Razor Shurikens. Try to get level 6 before him so you can kill him with Deathmark, and he can't sustain after with his Ravenous Flock. Kayle is then probably your biggest counter, and it's because of her intervention. She's able to stop the damage proc from your all-in combo on any of her teammates, which is pretty annoying to deal with. In the lane phase, she's then able to do a ton of harassment on you with her Righteous Fury and Reckoning, which is also annoying to deal with. Let's now move on to 3 more, this time starting with Kennen. Now Kennen is a very safe mid and top laner that's able to stun you with his Slicing Maelstrom or normal combo if you do deathmark him. Try to roam against him as much as possible, but keep in mind he does have decent mobility because of his electrical surge, so a good Kennen will probably follow you. Then there is Ahri, and you need to make sure you dodge your charm throughout the entire lane phase. If you're already on somewhat low health and you do get hit by one, it's surely going to cost you your life. She generally will roam a lot, so try to follow her and help your team. You'll then want to use your Deathmark whenever she doesn't have Spirit Rush or she doesn't have her charm available, so you know you can get it off. Last here we have Anivia, and early game will hopefully go decent as long as you can dodge her Flash Frost. Try to harass her as much as possible, but don't overcommit if she does have Rebirth off cooldown. But in the later stages of the game, you do have to be very careful when you go in for damage because Glacial Storm and Frostbite will chunk a big part of your health. Now we arrive at our item build, and for our normal start, we want to go for a longsword, 3 health potions, and a warding totem, but if we're against a really easy lane, we can get away with a longsword, a refillable potion, and a warding totem. It's nice to have sustain throughout the game and not have to spend extra money on health potions. For our core build, we go for a Yumu's Ghostblade, Duskblade, and a Black Cleaver. This will give us a lot of lethality right off the bat, 30% CDR, and a great armor shred. This is easily our best core build, but if we do need some early magic resist, then we may want to get a Maw first instead. For our boot options, we first have Merc Treads against CCs and AP teams, then we have some Ionians if we do need some CDR, Boots of Swiftness for full-on mobility, and Ninja Tabis against a high AD team. For the offensive items, we first have Blade of the Ruined King. It's a great way to deal some extra damage on our auto attacks, and the active is really good in duels. It of course also has lifesteal, it's all around a solid item. Now, if we need some extra armor penetration in the later stages of the game, LDR and Mortal Reminder are great. Usually I go for LDR, but if there's something like a Mundo or a Swain, then I will get the Grievous Wounds. We then have a few more lifesteal options in the Bloodthirster and the Death's Dance. I personally don't get them too often, but if you are wanting more lifesteal, they are solid items. For our defensive items, we of course have the Maw first. It is my go-to if there is a lot of AP bursty champions and I need some survivability. Edge of Night is also a fantastic item. It does give us some more lethality and magic resist, but also some out-of-combat movement speed, making our roams even better. Now, the best part though, and the reason I've listed it as a defensive item, is the fact that you can channel this for 1.5 seconds and get a spell shield that lasts 10 seconds. Amazing when you're going in for an ultimate. Definitely worth considering. But next, we have the Guardian Angel, another item definitely worth considering. The fact that you pick up a nice chunk of armor and magic resist, but also the ability to come back to life in the later stages of the game, is pretty damn overpowered. Now, if the enemy team does have a lot of easy to land CCs that we are worried about, we could get the Mercurial Scimitar as well to break out of one of those so we don't just jump in and die. Now, there's many full builds you can make with these items, but the example one that I run a lot of the time is taking our core, getting the Merc Treads, then the Maw, which does CDR cap us, and the Guardian Angel. It's not pure offensive like some Zeds do run, but it does give us some nice tankiness so we can get through our targets, including those tanky ones. If my Guardian Angel was on cooldown, I'd either get the Blade of the Ruined King for some lifesteal, an LDR if I did need armor penetration, or if I still wanted another defensive, Edge of Night. But that, ladies and gentlemen, covers everything I've got for the reworked mid lane Zed guide. I'd like to thank you guys a ton for watching, and sorry that it took a couple extra days. I was working on coming up with other ideas that I'm going to do for new series on this YouTube channel. I'm going to resume doing these guides at least one a day. You guys can also check out more of my content on my social medias, which will be down in the video description. But other than that, thank you guys a ton again for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Can't feel the fire in the skies.